Day one, we're troubleshooting. Are we live?
We're live, man, and we're looking. I'm Matt. This is Jake, and we're doing our first podcast here. Grad students, homies from University of Southern California, and Jake's balancing his camera on a big stack of books for those watching. Show him, Jake.
All right.
You had Third Reich there?
Yeah.
All right, run us through
I'm
these
all
books.
about the Third Reich.
Okay.
We're getting
Got some
canceled
Carl
day
Jung.
one. Yeah, we can go through the books, actually. I got the complete works of Shakespeare, which, for those of you who don't know, Sir Francis Bacon was actually Shakespeare. We got Carl Jung, the one and only. We got some Orwellian text right here, some Ernest Hemingway, all good stuff.
And the rise and fall of the Third Reich. And then your MacBook
last but not
Pro.
least.
And then the MacBook Pro, and then the iPhone. Is it iPhone balancing on the MacBook Pro for those listening? Yeah. It's got like 10 books. That's his rest for his camera here.
Listen, you got to start somewhere.
And that's where we're starting, man. We got a podcast that's not named, but the idea, guys, is we're going to
disagree.
Oh, you got a name?
I disagree. I think we do have a name.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember me bringing this up, but Dinner at Duke's, I think, is a great podcast name.
Dinner at Duke's. And that goes back to when we got some Caesar salads with extra anchovies and then some burgers to top it off.
Yeah, I got a Caesar salad, Dinner at Duke's. For those of you who don't know, Duke's in Huntington Beach, one of the classiest diners west of the Mississippi. As far as I'm concerned, each and every podcast that we have, we should be rocking polos. We should be dressed to the nines.
We got to look classy if we're at Duke's, right?
I mean, from the waist below, it's a tragedy. From the waist up, I'm rocking the $8 eBay polo. You know, we're looking somewhat dressed up, somewhat casual, which is just right for Duke's. And I think that's how we should approach the podcast, quite frankly. Is
I like that.
Somewhat
that's the
classy.
attitude.
Exactly. Somewhat classy, somewhat casual. You know, we got some topics, but ultimately we're just going to free ball it. We're loosey goose out here on the West Coast. And without further ado, I think you should get into the topics, Maddie.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, my first topic, it's a freestyle because this is casual. What book in your stack? Let's talk about one of your books on the stack there.
I haven't read any of them. These are in my queue.
Okay.
But I will tell you the book that I'm reading right now is called Chaos by Mr. Tom O'Neill. I hope I'm getting his name right.
That's his name.
I mean, I've told you about this book. It's really good.
Yeah, I just listened to the podcast again. You inspired me after we went over this last week.
It's pretty crazy stuff. I mean, I don't know if I believe a lot of it, but it completely flips the Manson trial upside down. And I think it's like a good appetizer for those of you who are kind of like, I don't agree with what I'm reading. And, you know, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. I think that kind of goes in that direction.
And Chaos. What is our podcast about in terms of people? Are we trying to cater to people who are like, I don't know if I believe what I'm reading, or where are we at on that journey? Because I'm kind of at the place where people have to go on that journey themselves.
100%.
You can't make someone want to believe a conspiracy theory. You can't convince someone that a politician might not have your best interests at heart. They have to see it for themselves. It's almost like a religious conversion. You can't make someone.
I was just about to say that. Yeah. And I don't want to cut you off because I don't know how these mics work. It might be better to cut you off in person, but yeah, I think it is like a religious conversion. You can't tell someone to, you know, find God in the same way that you can't tell someone to not trust the news, not trust the government. That's kind of you have to kind of come to that conclusion yourself. I completely agree.
Right. And so you're saying with Chaos, it's a great intro to that. And I agree, because this guy spent more than 20 years researching this. And even if you think that a lot of it isn't true, maybe you respect his amount of work, his work ethic into investigating.
No, 100%.
And
I mean, he put his life on the line. He talks about it in the book. His credibility was until he, you know, even now his credibility is like kind of on the up and up. He's now become quite renowned for the book, and he has a lot of, you know, friends in high places who have said nice things. But definitely while he was doing the research for the book, he talks about it. like his family thought it was going crazy, and I mean, crazy stuff. Just the sheer amount of time he took to write the freaking book, that alone is pretty crazy.
What's been the most challenging thing that you've read in the book that's made you go, wow, this is not something I would expect. This goes against the narrative, and this challenges our normal consensus of things?
So it's an interesting question in that I come to it already biased. I come to it already like jumping to the conclusion like, oh yeah, this makes total sense. So it's almost a fallacy to ask me like, what has this book taught me? Because it's more so confirming what I already knew, which is that a lot of stuff doesn't make sense, and that, not everything is a lie, of course, but you do have to do your own research. And I did watch and rewatch the podcast. The book itself, I'm only on chapter 2. I'm going to be completely transparent. Okay. This podcast is also about transparency. I'm not done with the book, but I know a lot about it. And right now I'm like just getting by, like right before he started talking about the government's involvement in the Manson stuff. That's where I'm at. I'm kind of in the helter skelter narrative, sort of like the Hollywood narrative. Like, how should I even put it? Like, for those of you who don't know, the Manson murders took place in the heart of Hollywood at this house that was known for throwing all these parties. So right now they're going through that cobweb, like this, I feel like Charlie and have you seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he's like pointing at he's pointing at the board and it's like a bunch of,
I've seen like 3 episodes, but I have seen that. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's a popular meme. So I feel like Charlie right now in that, and so does Tom O'Neill. It's like just a bunch of arrows of like, this actor is connected to this actor, and they both knew Manson and his followers. So how does that make sense? And so that's where I'm at in the book.
Right. Yeah, I haven't read the book, but to me, what I think people would find interesting is this Jolly West guy. He is just connected to everyone, and he was a doctor, I think, at UCLA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he found himself connected to everyone and everything. I think he ended up like doing work on Sirhan. He was finding his way. He represented Jack Ruby after he was Jack Ruby's doctor after Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey Oswald. And then he was also found and proven by documentation, actually a file that Tom O'Neill found at UCLA to be working on MK Ultra.
Right. So those are 3 things you brought up. First, Sirhan, he was the convicted killer of Bobby Kennedy. He was killed at a hotel in California. This was when he was, I think, running for president back in the late 60s, early 70s.
I don't know.
I don't know either. It might have been a little bit later, actually. But yeah, so that's number 1. Sirhan may or may not have been involved with MK Ultra. Certainly rubbed elbows with what was his name again? Jolly West.
So MK Ultra. MK Ultra was a program by the Central Intelligence Agency to, at least part of it was to see if they could have mind control over people through hallucinogenics.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, you can look up. It's called the Manchurian Candidate. It's it's in pop culture. It's this idea that you can activate someone to kill someone on command and then forget all about it.
Right.
So it's been talked about even in mainstream pop culture. But yeah, so MK Ultra comes up in the book. Jolly West is, at least according to Tom O'Neill and other researchers, at the heart of MK Ultra. He's a psychiatrist who, to your point, worked at UCLA, and he was renowned at his, up until his death. He was, written about profusely. And then you also brought up Jack Ruby, so Lee Harvey Oswald, who was the convicted killer of JFK, or did he actually live to see his conviction, or did he die before he went to trial?
Right. You know that? I love how you like automatically say convicted killer because it's so disciplined. Instead of saying the person who killed JFK, you say convicted killer. I guess
I
he'd
don't,
just be accused killer.
yeah, because I think because Jack
Who could kill
Ruby
them?
on live TV, I'm pretty sure killed Lee Harvey Oswald before he could take the
Right.
stand and, plead his case. And there's all these, again, weird connections that it's very hard to make sense of, mainly because none of, if not most of the documentation has not been released by the government, which of course the reason for that is because they're implicated, most likely. So it's hard to say what really happened. But in any event, Jack Ruby, he had connections to the mafia. He had connections to, I think, Jolly West. So just very weird stuff and a lot of connections that are hard to make sense of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, for people who are interested or want to challenge their point of view, they should check it out.
Chaos,
And
baby.
yes, baby.
Chaos, baby.
And as a transition, I know we're going to talk about, you want to talk about lockdowns today, Jake. I
Please.
tweeted this week, it is most sustainable for those who rule by might to veil it in democracy and manufactured consent. And I think that thought is a nice transition to the lockdowns and to talk about how, over the course of 2 years, we moved from a consensus of the lockdowns being a good thing that was good for the people, that kept people safe, to a consensus of that they're not needed, all with the same people maintaining power the whole time.
Yeah. Would you mind kind of, if you're able to, breaking down that paper that I sent you? Because I think it is interesting. I wasn't able to read it fully, but I know it definitely has to do with what we're talking about.
Right. I mean, you sent this to me, and it was an estimated impact of 2020 economic downturn on under 5 mortality for 129 countries. And basically what it said was countries either lost 5, 10, 15% of their GDP, different segments of these 129 countries. And it led to a higher loss of life in under 5-year-olds in these countries because of deaths that could have been prevented by intervention during the lockdowns. And that's directly attributed to the reduction in GDP. This article argues, or this study argues.
Right. So, I mean, it was just an article that I saw while, I'm on Twitter basically every day, and a lot of people criticize Twitter as like, oh, that's your news source. I mean, it's pretty much everyone's at this point. You're either watching mainstream news media outlets like CNN and Fox News. I mean, both of those outlets I obviously have issues with. Or you're following independent journalists, on what is it? There's websites I'm forgetting the name of, but social media is a great way to connect with these independent journalists.
Right.
And so I see articles like this all the time. I mean, I want to be perfectly clear. Of course, COVID is real. I've had it. I don't know, Matt. I think you've had it.
I've had it. I had heart complications after it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a thing. It exists, but you have to be grown up about the discussion because there is nuance. I mean, let's take the lockdowns, for example. That's what we're talking about. The lockdowns, according to a lot of people nowadays, were a complete and utter disaster, and did nothing to curb COVID. I mean, I saw another article on, I think it was school closures. Right. And a lot of this affects kids, which our society should probably be more kid focused. I mean, it's critical to protect children because they really can't protect themselves. And that's why we have a lot of laws surrounding, child labor, and you can't do this until you're 18. You can't do that until you're 21. And I saw an article about, I think it was an opinion piece in the New York Times, if I'm not mistaken, about how bad school closures were for kids and how they did nothing to curb COVID. So, all of this is multivariate, and no one wants to discuss that or even acknowledge that. So, I do think that the lockdowns were criminal, honestly.
Why do you think they're criminal? Because
I mean, at least
hurt children.
Well, I mean, I think they hurt people financially. When people can't make money, they can die. And what's funny is a lot of people at the, the top of the top who are discussing these things and ultimately deciding these things, they're not poor. Right. They can work via Zoom.
What you just said, if I can cut you off,
yeah,
people can't make money, they die. I saw that at USC. My first in the summer during our reporting, where we all had to do some basic reporting at USC. If you can't make money, you die. I did a story on a guy who was nearly homeless because he couldn't make rent, and he had a breathing problem. And had he been out in the street, he probably would have died soon.
Right.
I mean, he was barely making rent, staying alive, but this was a very, poor guy, barely making rent off Social Security and questionable disability. Something I found fascinating in journalism was learning how social workers try to get everyone on disability, whether they have a disability or not, because Social Security doesn't pay enough. Renter's assistant doesn't pay enough in these high cost cities like LA. So they're trying to get everyone on disability to try to help them make rent and just have enough each month to get by with rent, get by with basic food. But I digress.
But what's interesting about that, though, is it's obvious. If you don't have enough money, you could die.
Yeah.
That's plain to see. There's not even an argument there. But a lot of people on the left, and I'm not left or right, but a lot of people on the left, this is a working theory I have. One of the reasons they economic stimulus is not, or like serious economic focus is not like in their vocabulary. Everyone can agree that the right is by far and away better with economics. But the reason a lot of people on the left, they're rich, and talking about money makes them very uncomfortable. So they don't think about it. And then they turn to other policies like, oh, we should be nicer to people. We should re-educate them via these workshops at the workplace. The solution for them is never, let's help them financially, which is just so obvious. Because at the end of the day, most, if not all things boil down to, do you have a lot of money or don't you?
Right.
And if you don't, there's probably, at a certain point, you also have to take self-responsibility, but not having money sucks and it doesn't help.
Right. And because I'm doing this podcast with you and I haven't seen you a lot since USC, I keep getting reminded of stories of USC. And USC is like a place where you see this. There's a lot of really wealthy kids. And then there were kids in our classes who were like working 2 shifts at In-N-Out and commuting from their house and loaded with debt. And then there was kids who were completely fine and taken care of. So
yeah. And they either, I could talk about this all day. They either don't have to think about it because they have money, or the fact that they have money actually makes them super sad and like, oh, I don't deserve this. And so they can't think about it. It makes them anxious. So they turn to other things. That's the working theory that I have. Okay. A lot of people aren't prepared to actually talk about money, which is the main problem, I think, in our society. But anyways, back to the lockdown stuff. Yeah, I think they are, at least on an extended scale. It's been 2 years?
Yes.
Since the introduction to lockdowns, not since we found out about COVID. It's been longer since we found out about COVID.
When was that? Like November 2019?
That was like late 2019.
Yeah.
So if you want to go back to then, that's been like 2.5. I don't know. I'm bad with math. 2.5 years.
More than 2.5 years.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. So, for anyone, for the 2 to 3 people who are listening, I challenge you to find any evidence that the lockdowns were helpful in any way, shape, or form, especially on a net scale, like a net plus or a net negative. I challenge you to find any evidence that they were successful or on the whole positive.
Yeah, like on a net scale, it'd be tough because you could say, well, that made me feel safer and I got to work from home on Zoom, but someone got broke and got on the street.
Yeah, all the janitors who can obviously not work on Zoom, they all went broke. Some of them may have, because they couldn't eat, they may have, gotten homeless, they may have died, but I don't have to think about them because I don't know that many janitors.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's bad stuff. And then,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I read a book about this called Viral. It's another book that I highly recommend that I don't have on my stack of books helping me today.
But you did read it though.
The whole thing.
Okay.
One of the few books I've ever read is Viral. And by the way, you have to remind me, I'm going to give it to you because it's that good. It's like ultimately very dry because it's about COVID.
Yeah. The search for the origin of COVID-19.
Yeah. And I don't know if you could pull it up, but it's just about like where it came from, all of the.
So where do you think it came from? The lab?
It's at least 50-50 that it's, came from a lab.
It didn't come from the bat, right?
I don't know. I would have to reread the book. I don't want to misspeak.
Okay,
but
what do you think though?
I think the authors of the book put it best, where I think their conclusion, which I agree with, was that more likely than not, it came from the lab. And there's two scenarios. There's either while they were studying it, they took it from, I think there was a cave that they discussed, not in Wuhan, but somewhere else in China, where they may have gotten the original COVID virus, and they may have been experimenting on it, and maybe they hadn't modified it at all, but within them like bringing it to the lab, or somehow in the handling of the virus, it got out. So that's option number one.
Yeah.
Option number two of a lab leak is they did successfully modify it in some way, shape, or form, and then it got out. And then there's two, if you really want to talk about it, there's two options within that second option, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on, but maybe we got to get to another topic. Was it incidental or was it on purpose? And I'm not going to go so far as to say it was on purpose. I don't know if there's any evidence for that. But I think in my view, it certainly needs to be looked into. And if I had a gun to my head, I'd say it came from a lab. But, I'm open to evidence each and every day, as we all should.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to relook at the incentives. Like, what's the incentive for China for it to be released? What's the incentive for the US to be released? Like, what's the game theory? High level game theory is probably what would make me pick whether it was released on purpose or not. I think it came from the lab.
Yeah.
I don't think it came from some dude in a wet market eating.
And I like the way I don't mean to cut you off, Matt, but I like one of the reasons I wanted to do this with you is because you think about things a certain way. Like, I don't know what game theory is. And you're like, what's the game theory on this? I'm like, I don't know, bro.
Okay. So game theory is just incentives. Sorry, I should have said, who are the incentives for the powers that be? What were the interests for the US empire? What were the interests for the Chinese empire?
Yeah, what do you think? And maybe we'll get into another topic, because I know we got a lot to talk about.
So let's play this out. If the US, because I think the US funded the Wuhan lab, right?
Yes, I think there was a connection made between the NIH and the Wuhan lab.
So say the US has people in there. They have covert people in there. They can release it. We'll play their angle first. What's the US interest in releasing this virus on the world?
I don't know if there is any. Can you think of any?
Strengthen the US dollar. Strengthen the US dollar. Prolong US. I'll play it out. Prolong US empire through strengthening the US dollar. We know the US is a declining civil empire relative to China. China's ascending. Its economics are ascending. The US demographics are descending in terms of population growth. Elon Musk keeps saying everyone needs to have kids. We're declining our population. We're only net positive because of immigration. Otherwise, we're more like Japan, losing population. So we have declining demographics, which is the sign that the peak of our empire is crested and we're going down. China has ascending demographics. Well, maybe not ascending demographics, but ascending economics. So you say, hey, what's something that the US has over the rest of the world? It has the world reserve currency, it has the dollar, all trades done in the dollar. The dollar is where all the power is. And so if you lock everyone down, what do you have to do when there's lockdowns? You got a stimulus because people can't work. So you got to print money out of thin air. You need to give people something for nothing, which devalues the dollar, which creates inflation. Inflation just means you printed money from nothing. It means there's more dollars chasing fewer goods. Okay, this is where it's going to get complicated. Keep following. So everybody prints money, right? But everything's done in dollars. Dollars are worth more. You print the crappy. Oh no, he's not nodding his head anymore. Jake, you're not. So for those who aren't watching, he's nodding his head the whole time, and then he stopped.
Yo, we've talked about this. You're the money man. I don't know zilch, nada, sayonara when it comes to finances. I'm good at saving money, but I know nothing about money. But I love this. I
You
want
like
you to keep
saving.
going.
Okay. Anyways, dollar is what everything's traded in, not Bitcoin, not yet. And so basically, when everyone has to print money, give unemployment checks, print money out of thin air, which is what the governments do. Fiat currencies aren't backed by anything. Does that make sense?
We're going to talk about it hundreds of times, so eventually it will make sense.
Okay. Like instead of printing dollars, though, they just add a zero to the Federal Reserve like bank account statement.
You said what? It's not backed by anything?
It's not backed by anything. Like if the Federal Reserve makes
that.
more money, they like add a zero in the computer.
We went off the gold standard. I know that.
Off the gold standard. So they can like add a zero in the like Federal Reserve computer.
Okay.
And then like loan that to banks. It's pretty nuts. But anyways, when you print all this money, long story short is that the bad currencies become worth even less. Like all the other currencies are crashing relative to the dollar. The dollar is getting really strong right now. Okay. Because all these other countries around the world printed their crappy currencies and ended up making themselves weaker. So that's my very long-winded answer for what would be the incentive for the US. It would be create lockdowns, everyone prints money, makes the US dollar stronger relative to those currencies. Like a euro is almost 1-to-1 with the dollar, and euros are normally stronger than a dollar, like $1.20.
Okay.
So
if I go to Europe and I transfer my money, my American dollar into euro money, I have more money or less money?
You have more than you did in the past.
Oh, okay. So we're going to Europe. That's what I'm hearing.
$1.05 will get you like €1.
So you have, I don't know. Listen, I'm going to learn. That's also part of the podcast. Every day is a school day.
Every day is school day. But all you got to know is like before the pandemic, it was like $1.20 to get a euro. I know you're about to head over there. Now you only got to pay like $1.05.
Okay, fire.
So your dollars are going to buy you more stuff in Europe.
Okay.
Like Europe's kind of expensive, you know?
Absolutely.
To the US for like a burger, it's going to cost more for a burger in Europe. But now you're going to get more burger. I know you love burgers, Jake.
Speaking of burgers, should we talk about Ezra Miller?
Let's talk about it. You go. By the way, I just found out Zoom's getting smart. Talking about the economy crashing. All the stocks like crashed back to their pre-pandemic levels, including Zoom, which was one of the stock darlings, and we're recording this on Zoom. And bad news bears, we got like 3 minutes before this meeting's up, even though it's just two of us. It used to be unlimited for the two person.
Damn. Okay. Well, before we end,
shut this down in like 3 minutes, but
that's okay.
Let's pick it up on Ezra. Okay, everybody, we're gonna pick it up on Ezra and restart this meeting.
Yeah, this is gonna be our 3-minute dash to the halftime finish line. Ezra Miller. What was he? The Flash.
The Flash.
I think he was in a couple projects. He was the Flash.
Dude, I don't watch DC unless it's Batman. I'll be honest.
Me too. Me too.
This and I was.
I'm glad you said that because I feel the same way. But anyway, Ezra Miller, who I think is actually a they, which I'm sensitive to. Hey, Ezra, if you're listening, I'm with they. Okay.
They go into prison.
Yeah.
They in trouble.
Yeah, they are fucked. They are fucked. Exactly. Turns out he's a really bad guy. I think I first heard of his antics like a month ago or 2 months ago, where he just like started yelling at this couple in Hawaii at like a karaoke bar. I mean, it was nuts. Like I didn't even think much of it. I was just like, okay, this is like another crazy actor guy. Sure. But then all of a sudden I saw this news about, I guess, what was he grooming a 12-year-old? Is that what it was?
Grooming a 12-year-old in Boston, Massachusetts. And the mom was like, why is this dude here? He's like a famous Hollywood star. Like, Don't you have to film something?
Yeah. No, crazy stuff. And then he had done that before, I'm pretty sure. And he was like on the run. I may have made that up, that part about being on the run, but it sounds nice.
They don't know where he is right now, I'm pretty sure.
Yes. Okay. Then I am right. Yeah. Which is, I sent that to you because I thought it was crazy. I mean, I know these like
why
Hollywood.
Did you want to talk about this?
just like, the decline of culture maybe, or of society. Because like, these Hollywood types, I think, are becoming like crazier and crazier because it's currency to like,
Isn't
be
this
out
in the culture
there.
of Hollywood? I want to take the other side of this, Jake, with our less than 1 minute left.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that he's like the crazy eyeshadow, you know, he's not a he, which is, totally fine. But I don't know, the conspiracy theorist in me is
It's a good thing you're
saying
not
maybe this,
recording from New York, Jake, or you just have a $5,000 fine for that.
I know, maybe this is a cover for, his terrible antics. And then, he's using that as like a smokescreen. That's my hot take. But we don't have that much time. We'll be right back, folks.
We'll be right back. All right, so we're back, fam, and we're still talking about Ezra Miller, and I'm taking the other side of this because Jake is saying that this is a kind of a note that of this decline of society, how bad Hollywood is. And to me, this is, Jake, a continuation of the norm. We've had, child sex rings in Hollywood before. We've had, I can't think of the rings exactly because I don't like to follow Hollywood and pop culture too much, but if the 2 or 3 not buying this want to Google it, there have been past child sex rings in Hollywood. So
What
to
was
me,
the one? I don't mean to cut you off.
the
What was
norm.
the one that was recently in the news? The MVIXM
Something like that. It's
with like that
Nixum,
girl from,
Nixm.
yeah, that girl from Smallville
Yes.
was like their spokesperson or something.
So how is this a show of the decline? Isn't this just a kind of a shining a light on something that continues to be an issue under the rug?
Mhm. I'm meditating.
Take
I'm
your time, man.
meditating. And my answer to that is maybe it isn't a change. Yeah, maybe it's further exemplification of why we shouldn't listen to these people and why, artists sometimes can't be trusted. I mean, the interesting thing about art is it's one of the only things you can't really control unless you're in a totally fascist / dictatorial type government.
Sure.
Then they actually use art to their advantage, or they try to anyway.
Yeah.
Like in Italy, I remember I was in a class, they had this art form called commedia dell'arte, which I'm definitely not saying right, but
And what did that mean?
Mussolini, he tried to make a couple of plays about how good fascism was, but none of them were very good. For the most part, art is very, very hard to control. And it's one of the ways that you can, free society. But back to the Chaos book. One of the points that Tom O'Neill makes is it's one of the titles of one of his subchapters, Live Freaky, Die Freaky. And it was sort of this thing that was said around the late 60s about how people in Hollywood lived. They sort of were, just, orgies every night and, divorcing their wives, and just all they were really interested in was drugs and sex and, the typical stuff that you hear when you, talk about like rock and roll and all those people during those times. But
Sure.
He goes so far as to say that because of that lifestyle, there was a feeling in Hollywood that the people almost deserved it, which I thought was a little shocking. But it wasn't just Tom saying that. He actually interviewed a lot of old Hollywood people, and more than once that sort of train of thought came up. Oh, these people, they were sort of in with the wrong crowd. They got what was coming to them, this sort of thing.
You're talking about the murders.
Yeah. At the
And so
Cello
this is
Drive.
an old, like almost like Sodom and Gomorrah, like type of like mimetic thing going on. Like it was in their psyche collectively that, if you do bad things, you get something coming back on you.
Yeah, maybe. And you can maybe speak more to the mimetic Sodom and Gomorrah energy, because I know you are more well versed in the Bible than I am. But yeah, no, I thought that was a really striking part of the book. Actually, was sort of the ethos of Hollywood at that time was like the ship is sinking, but like at least we're having fun.
Yeah.
We may get killed, and as a matter of fact, some of our own people did get killed. At this Cello Drive house, that they talk about in in the book, which was the scene of the murder.
Sure.
They would have these wild parties, and who was it at the time? Sharon Tate, who was married to Roman Polanski. They were staying at the house, and they would allegedly throw all these like crazy parties that were like part orgy, part like drug scandal, part, demonic rituals, like insane stuff that if you want to know more about,
Sounds like
definitely read the book.
WikiLeaks files. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, bro. No, read the book, bro. That's why they were like kind of like a lot of people who got interviewed by Tom, they wouldn't give their names for fear of like, I don't know, people finding out who I am and like that I'm talking to you. But they would talk about how crazy the parties were at that house. And so
demonic stuff, they were doing like rituals.
I don't know. They talked about one scene in particular where I don't know if you remember the drug dealers who were staying at the house at the time. Like they made a show out of one of the guys getting effed in the butt, and like it was like a retaliatory act because like one guy had like done something to the other guy, and he's like, okay, in front of all these people, I'm gonna, excuse my French, rape you, and then like tie you to a tree and like take photos of you. I mean, I think that's kind of demonic. Like that's kind of effed up to me anyway.
Right. It is.
So yeah, why does that have anything to do with Ezra Miller? Just because he's a bad guy, I guess.
No, just because you were just exploring, you were meditating on the idea that this is something that's been ingrained in Hollywood for a long time.
Yes,
which is what I was saying.
Yes. Just don't listen to these people. That's the conclusion. Yeah.
So now that you're back on Tom O'Neill and this book, one of the big things that it talks about is the idea that they were exploring that LSD could permanently alter someone's personality, change parts of who they were. And I wanted to ask you, since you have experimented with psychedelics, if you think that that is a real thing, if you know anyone who's,
the nitty-gritty.
I have never done psychedelics. I'm interested. I think it'd be interesting to try like ayahuasca or something. I know you went to that as part of journalism school. You went to that retreat, I think in Florida. But I would be curious what you think about whether those substances could alter someone's personality or who they are as a person.
Yeah. Well, before I get into that, I actually want to ask you, what are your thoughts on psychedelics and maybe even drug use in general? Do you have strong thoughts?
Well, I haven't done any drugs. I've drinking, but I've never, smoked weed. I haven't done any drugs. So I don't have a big, I've taken like opiates, I guess, from like knee surgery or something.
Which is definitely a drug.
What? Definitely.
Which is
so I have taken
drug.
drugs. I guess I haven't like taken drugs intentionally to like feel something. I also grew up with a bunch of asthma. So when I would get really hopped up on albuterol and like strong like Sudafed, which has some sort of active drug, like you have to be a certain age to buy Sudafed now. I can't remember what the active ingredient is, but Sudafed plus a lot of albuterol. So I've definitely kind of felt high-ish before in my life.
Yeah.
But that's about it. But what do I think about it?
You can come back to that.
I'm interested in it. Okay, you go.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, I can sort of tell you what I have to say, and then maybe that'll inform what you have to say.
Yeah.
I've been sober for, I think, 2 years. I really have no plans of ever doing psychedelics again.
Okay.
To be honest with you. Certainly I would never drink again. I was actually thinking today, like, oh, maybe I should do like a CBD joint or something, which is still not really drugs, but I was thinking about that because I have tried CBD recently, and I do think that there's something there in terms of it either being good for you or relaxing you or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in CrossFit. I do CrossFit and Love Fitness who like a lot of CBD and that for recovery, like take CBD before bed or like all these CBD oils. I don't know much about CBD, but there seems to be something there based on all the advertisements I've seen and all the athletes who use it.
I have a lot of stuff to give you, bro. And the next time I see you, you're going to be getting books. You're going to be getting CBD gummies.
Education.
You're going to be getting, bro.
This is the classroom. I'm learning.
Next
I know
time we go to
nothing about this. Like, you know nothing about finance.
I mean, right now we're at Duke's, let's be clear. But the next time we're at the other Duke's,
Yeah.
I'll be giving you all that stuff.
Malibu.
Yeah. Yeah, bro. Each time a new Dukes.
Yeah.
That's the move. But this is Dukes. I want to be clear. This is Dukes. This is dinner
they're
at
being
Dukes.
nice tonight. I should be kicked out for wearing a t-shirt, but
Yeah.
they're letting it slide.
No, that's terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm showing you up, but it's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been sober for 2 years. But yeah, I never really did anything in high school. I was just like, on my steady grind, playing basketball. Maybe I drank like one beer or something, but like basically a nerd. And then in college, I sort of let loose a little bit. And then, like my freshman and sophomore year, started drinking and all that classic stuff, gave it the college try.
UCSB.
And then UC Santa Barbara, which is rich in its partying history. Actually, by the time I got there, they were starting to shut it down a little bit just because of they had this thing called Deltopia, and then before that they had this thing called Flowtopia, which was a disaster.
Okay.
Flowtopia was the in the water version of Deltopia, which was fun on paper, but the next day after Flowtopia there was so much trash on the beach, and they were like, oh, we messed up, bro. So I think they only did that one time.
I feel like Flowtopia is cooler.
It is cooler, but it was like just environmental disaster,
right?
Which actually would be a perfect segue into one of the articles I sent you, but let me finish this first. Yeah, Deltopia was super raucous the year before I got in, and so they were starting to really like try to tamper down the partying, which you can't really do, but yeah, so it was fun when I got there, and it wasn't until I think my senior year that I really started thinking about doing psychedelics. I know I was abroad at the time, and then I did magic mushrooms, which were legal where I was when I was studying abroad.
And what are those? Are those just like shrooms?
Yeah. They have particular type where I was. And so I did them, had a great time. I remember I was listening to this one specific album. It was Earl Sweatshirt's Doris, which if you haven't heard that, highly recommend. I know you're not really a rap guy, but that's one of my favorite albums of all time.
Send it to
Doris.
me. I'm in the classroom. I'm at Duke's.
Yeah, bro. So I was listening to that. I remember I felt like I was in a painting, literally. I was on this bridge and the sun was setting, and I was listening to the intro track off of Doris. And it was just picturesque in my mind. I'll say it again. I felt like I was in a painting. And then I remember I was just sort of floating through the city. I felt like I had to walk to meet my friends. First of all, I took like an hour Uber ride with this guy who I didn't intend to speak to. And then we had this like crazy conversation while I was coming up on the mushrooms, like when it was first starting to hit me.
Okay.
And then I had to walk at least like 15, 30 minutes to see my friends. So I had to walk through the city. I felt like I was floating. I felt like it was effortless. And I like walked into they have forgetting the name of their grocery store, but I remember I walked into the grocery store accidentally. And anyway, I was going over these bridges and through the city, and it was great. And that was my first experience with psychedelics, which was, I don't think there was anything really negative about it. So I did it several more times when I got back to the States.
Same thing or different?
Well, so the first time it was shrooms, and then I did acid a couple of times, and then I did shrooms several more times. And then I did, let me round this out. I did DMT.
Okay.
And then I did ayahuasca.
Which is like DMT is like synthetic ayahuasca.
Well, so, and I actually should do more research on this. I wrote a whole thesis on ayahuasca, my experience with ayahuasca, but DMT is the active ingredient in ayahuasca.
Got it.
And so as to what the difference is between when I did DMT the first time and when I did the second time when it was in ayahuasca, that's a great question. The first time it was in a bong somehow, so I don't know how it was prepared. But the second time it was in a brew, sort of a mixture of all these plants called ayahuasca.
Got it.
And that was the last time I did psychedelics, was October 2020, I believe. and I've never wanted to do it ever since. And
so that's a big change from that journey, from the great experience of the shrooms to that was, you had some transitions in there. What changed?
Oh yeah. So, I mean, that begs the question, why did you stop? Et cetera. Well, not et cetera. Why did you stop? Let's start there. I think I was just done. Alan Watts has a famous saying where he was a famous, I don't know, Buddhist thinker or Zen master, but he was originally an Englishman, I think. And he had a saying roughly, you should pick up the phone, but once you know there's someone on the other end, you hang up the phone. And he was actually talking about psychedelics, saying, you can do them. Maybe you should do them. But after a point, you have to know when to stop, because you could go crazy, I think was the essence of that quote.
Okay.
And I think there's truth to that. I think you could easily go overboard. I think you could damage yourself. I mean, there's a lot we don't know about psychedelics. There's psychiatry is going to start dealing more and more with psychedelics as I don't know what the exact terminology is, but at a certain point, if you've exhausted enough treatment options, you can actually sign up for ketamine therapy. And a lot of people get significant relief from that. Psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is something that's on the rise and will definitely not be going away.
Right, particularly for PTSD, but you're on the other side of that. You chose to stop. Did you have experiences? Did you pick up the phone and hear a voice on the other side?
Yeah, no,
it wasn't
for sure.
Just in a painting. It wasn't just you in a painting.
I mean, hold on, I'm just kind of fixing. Do you see me? Did I cut out?
Yeah, you're good. You cut out, but you're back.
Okay, I'm back.
You were in the painting for a second, but you're back.
I think we probably have half an hour left on my phone, which is probably a good time to end the podcast anyway.
Absolutely, perfect.
Yeah, no, when I did DMT the first time, this is going to sound crazy. I'm not sure if it was real or not. It probably wasn't real, but I saw energetic beings forming like a semicircle around me. And the thing you should know when you're doing DMT, not ayahuasca, it's a different experience when you're doing it when it's in ayahuasca. But when you're doing DMT, it actually objectively temporally, it doesn't take that long at all for you to start and finish the experience. But in your head, it could last a lifetime.
Wow.
So it did seem like it lasted a while, the experience. But what I got from it was what I described to you was like I had this distinct sense that there was a semicircle of energetic beings. That's the only way I could put it. And
nothing more, nothing less. That was it.
That was it. Okay. And I was doing it with friends, and of course, like when I told them, they were like freaking out because they had like similar experiences. They're like, "What the?" I remember exactly where we were. I was staying in this. I was in a pre-med fraternity at the time. I was staying in the house that they had. But yeah, so that was one of the things I remember. But yeah, I could see it being damaging, and I never wanted to damage myself. I think that I learned enough, from introspection, assisted by the drugs that I was using. And so I decided to stop.
All right. And you basically decided to stop to just play it safe, or you'd seen enough, or?
Yeah, I didn't think I really had any more to gain, to be honest with you. And I didn't want it, if we look at it like as a performance curve, I didn't want to start going down. Right. I wanted to end at my peak,
Did you feel after like winning. Any changes to yourself or to your personality, or no?
The safe answer is yes and no. I learned more about what those drugs did to me each and every day. I learned more about, what I learned from them or what I didn't learn from them, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of forgetting your question, but
no, it was basically just like, it all comes back to Tom O'Neill and the CIA, like everything in life. Yes. Everything comes back to those spooks. No, they were trying to figure out, can you change, obviously the ultimate question was, can you mind control someone to assassinate
Yes.
someone and then have complete deniability. But part of that was, can you change someone's personality and what they're like from
Yes.
psychedelics? So my
If you use
question was,
enough.
did you think your personality changed? Not did you become more enlightened? Not did you like learn something, benefit? Was there like any tangible changes to your mood or your behavior or what you were like as a human being?
I think if we go, go a little Jordan Peterson here, I think maybe my openness changed.
Okay.
I know Jordan likes to talk about that and how that differs between political parties. I think that I became perhaps more open-minded, maybe more empathetic, something like that. Again, I'm still thinking about it, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But I think it's certainly possible to mold someone especially the amounts that they were doing. I mean, if you really look into it, it was pretty egregious.
Yeah, it's really sad, honestly.
Yeah, unknowingly they were giving these people mega doses, arguably, and attempting to mold them to their benefit.
Yeah.
So I think certainly that is possible.
Okay. And now, what was your perfect transition?
Oh yeah, it was this is probably going to be a small segment, but it was the article that I read on Nixon.
Okay, I've got it up.
Is this
the rise of American environmentalism? Richard Nixon, how a Republican president ushered in the EPA.
I was just going to say, should I turn the light on? Am I getting super dark right now?
Yeah, Duke's is getting dark, man.
Well, introduce the article and then, I'll be right back.
Y'all heard it. Richard Nixon, fresh out of Orange County, California, where I'm broadcasting from. This guy's up in LA. He's crazy, but lifelong LAer. I respect it.
Crazy dude.
He knows his pockets of comfort up there, but I'm feeling good in Orange County. Richard Nixon ushered in the EPA. That's the introduction.
Listen, I said that to be provocative. What really happened was the EPA was introduced under Nixon. But that's it's interesting you phrased it like that. You phrased it like that because that's how I wrote it in the Google Doc. But that's basically the crux of the article was, did Nixon even want to be environmentally friendly?
Or was he too busy focusing on Vietnam or something?
Yeah, something like that. And if you actually look at the article, maybe we'll be able to post it with the podcast.
Yeah.
It does sound like the article is written by two people, which to me means, we both went to J school. I think that means that the writer was maybe too friendly to Nixon. And then the editor kind of added in some, qualifications like, basically trying to make Nixon seem like a monster. I think there was some additions made.
Sure.
But in any event, it just talked about how like Nixon, the EPA was started under Nixon, which is the Environmental Protection Agency. And, it leads to the larger point that I want to make, which is, just like most of, I think, political history is mythology, and a lot of people like to play sides. The common mythology that I heard when I was growing up was that, Republicans could give a damn about the environment, which I think to an extent is still maybe true. But I think that also there are certain liberals who don't think about the environment. And it may be that liberals percentage wise or care about the environment more, but you still have to be able to look beyond the teams, I guess is the point here, and be willing to admit that the EPA was started under Nixon. That was in the article. It says, up until that point, no president in history was as environmentally friendly as Nixon, which you would never hear a Democratic spokesperson say that, not even once.
No.
Because, that wouldn't help them. It's not that it wouldn't help the people, it's that it wouldn't help them.
Yeah.
Right. And now I ask you, I beg you to add on to my elaboration. What do you think?
No, I think it's interesting. I'm not so interested in this. It's an interesting idea though. Like, what were things I was raised with? I was raised in a conservative household on, how great George W. Bush was, or the Iraq War was worth fighting, and Afghanistan made sense. And those are both two things that completely crumbled But when, when I was a kid I wasn't a part of the culture war, but my family was on the side of, not the side of Michael, who's the documentarian? He like made all those.
Oh, Michael Moore.
What?
Is it Michael Moore?
Yeah, I was gonna say
That
the
guy?
big fat white guy, but that's a lot better.
Yeah. No, that's pretty on point.
Michael Moore.
He is
He
big
was
and
making these
fat.
documentaries about how corrupt George Bush was and Dick Cheney, and then when you come back with your journalist mind, you're like, this stuff has a good point, and then you reflect on your childhood, and you say, well, what's the disconnect between my childhood and this open mind that you talked about? How much of could be attributed to psychedelics, I don't know, but this open mind where you consider what the truth is more objectively, more with just the mind of someone investigating what's true. And I think connecting that back to this with Nixon, I 100% agree with you. It's like people don't want to know what's true. They want to know what makes them feel good. And then people in positions of power are incentivized to, not educate the masses on that the EPA started under Nixon.
Yeah. And I mean, let's talk about Nixon again. I watched an interview. He wrote a lot of books. And I think it was after his like 5th or 6th book where he was interviewed and they asked him about, I think it was birth control. And he went out and said it. He's like, yeah, I'm pro birth control. Or as he put it, I'm pro population control, which was like, damn, Nixon, like tricky dick, bro. With the
you straight up say it. It's not like now.
Yeah. No, he was very blunt. He was like, I'm pro population control. I think it's necessary. He was pro gun control, at least in that interview. And again, unless you were inquisitive and wanted to go up on Google or maybe, DuckDuckGo and look up, was Nixon pro gun control? No one would ever tell you that outright. Chances are they wouldn't tell you anyway. And so that begs the question, what else didn't you know? I mean, it's back to maybe the core of our show is like, what else don't you know? Or what else have you been led to believe? I mean, again, I'm not like left or right. I'm still trying to figure out the whole gun thing. I mean, I know that we need access to guns because governments can become tyrannical. It's a fact. And when it comes to not birth control, but abortion, I misspoke. He was talking about abortion, and he said, I am in certain cases pro-abortion. I apologize. And for me, yeah, to an extent, I am pro-abortion as well. But those are both very tricky issues that I think require nuance. And again, you have to be a grown-up to discuss those issues in depth. And it maybe would help if people were truthful about those issues and like who actually supports and doesn't support them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would jump in on that, except for I think we're gonna have to cut off do another Zoom meeting if we get into those topics. But I will definitely get into it with you on abortion and gun control in another episode.
Okay, that's a great conclusion. Dinner at Duke's, people. We're just getting started. I have ideas. Matt has ideas, and we're gonna keep it rolling.
We're gonna keep rolling. And last thing, we're gonna let me finish it off with the one story I put in the Google Doc. I'm gonna put it up here. I'm actually gonna share my screen. This is the number of food plants that have been burned down.
Oh, this one, bro.
You've been seeing this, right, Jake?
Yes.
Okay, I'm zooming in, guys. We got
straight fodder.
This is 97 instances since the start of 2021. Oh,
which
that's
first
a ticket from crypto. Ignore that. Oh no,
dude, that list was crazy. I don't know who made it. It was probably Alex Jones on his false flag Reddit account, but that list is insane.
Right. So all the way down, these are food plants in the United States that have just been like destroyed. And so what we're talking about is I've got ideas, Jake's got ideas, and only you can choose. Do you want to look into all these things? Do you want to know why all these food plants have been burned down? Million chickens destroyed at egg farm in Nebraska. Here, let's get something better. Raging chemical fire at Nutrient Ag Solutions. What else? Small plane crashes in the lot of General Mills. Saturday Night Fire destroyed a poultry building at Forsman's Farms.
Damn.
Largest pork company in the US shuts down California plant due to high costs. Fire breaks out at food processing plant. And so it's a lot going on here. And I want to leave everyone with just have a curious mind. I encourage you to it. Jake encourages you to it. And we've both been better for it. And that's what Dinner at Duke's is all about.
My lawyer has spoken. That's a wrap, baby.